sorry. Is it? Okay.
Yep, it started recording.
Yeah.
All right. Thanks everybody for coming to the third event for the Microsoft 365 Pro Low No Code Developers Meetup. Today we will be discussing choosing who to get embed with, PCF or embedded Canvas app. So who do we have here? Lachlan, why don't you start off first?
Yeah, sure. My name's Lachlan. I'm a functional consultant at KPMG Australia, and I'm listed here as the Canvas app fanboy. I suppose that's a funky way of saying, yeah, I'm on the low or no code end of the spectrum. Yeah, I'm primarily interested in those solutions where I don't need to ask someone else for help, where I can do it myself, where I don't need to go get a expensive developer to do. And so I've done a fair bit of exploration in Canvas apps, just generally, but then also looking at embedding Canvas apps on forms and like scenarios that are good and bad to do that. Yeah, so keen to share what I know.
Awesome, thanks, Lachlan. Okay, so my name is Tae but everybody knows me as Tae. And I am labeled as the PCF fangirl, and I am. So that's what I'm going to talk about today. I'm based in Sydney, Australia, currently working as a Dynamics 365 application specialist at Blackmores. I do label myself as a pro developer, as most days I'll be either designing or implementing technical solutions using various tools from my arsenal. I'm a C# developer at heart, but last few years I've been dabbling in client-side frameworks like Angular and React. So, shall we begin?
Yeah, sure.
Right. Okay, so Lachlan, what are we covering today?
So I suppose the real genesis of this presentation came from Elena, where she says, you know, she wanted to cover this topic and present some fun stuff, and it really came from like, you know, I want to fight, you know, I want Canvas apps versus PCF, and you know, like really, you know, like the two sides of this coin. And I distinctly remember having this conversation with her where I suddenly went very boring management consultant going, well, it's not that simple. It all exists on a continuum of time, effort, and money and all that kind of stuff, and blah, blah, blah. And Elena's just going, nah, boring. You've got to have it a fight. So we'll present both, I suppose, the pros and cons of the two versions. But I do have to be a boring management consultant and eventually talk about this time, money, and effort kind of continuum. We'll get to that at the end. But effectively, we're going to go through what's a PCF, what's an embedded Canvas apps, what's the difference, why would you use those two, and just talk about some limitations, talk about where you'll use them, where you wouldn't use them, and kind of just hope to inform you to make a good decision next time you need to embed something on a form and improve the UI. And I suppose also just to set expectations to be really clear, we're talking about what was Dynamics 365 CRM, what's now called Power Platform, that model-driven app form experience. We're talking about embedding things on those forms. Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah. Next slide.
Oh, awesome.
I think it's over to you.
I enjoyed that so much. I just want to just stay on the slide. So, all right. So I'm up first. So let's discuss about PCFA. So let's use this virtual hand feature thing on Teams. I just want to know, like, raise your virtual hands. Who doesn't know what PCF is? Anybody? Hands up? No, everybody knows what PCF is? Okay.
Well, someone raised their hand.
I'm sure Andrew knows what PCF is. And Michelle, you do too. Anyways, so okay. Can I get so I guess that means that my second question is not relevant because I was gonna ask who actually have used PCF controls before and you know them all. So that's wonderful. Okay, thanks for all of that. Pardon? Sorry, I'll just continue. Okay, as you can see from the slide, PCF control, it stands for Power Apps Component Framework. Putting it simply, is a framework for building custom controls for Power Apps application. They are reusable code components, so once you have implemented it, you can deploy to multiple environments and you can configure it in many locations in your Power Apps. So as you can imagine, it will actually open up quite a big opportunity for pro developers like myself to help extend and enhance the Power Apps solution. So just an overview of the PCF's journey so far and where it's going. As you can see, it's been around for about 2 years. A lot has been happening, and just briefly, it's in general availability in model-driven app, it's in public preview in Canvas app, and Microsoft is working on getting it released on Power Apps portal. I have to say the adoption of the PCF control by the community has been quite significant, and I can only imagine that it will increase in the future. So for me, what is really interesting to see is how Microsoft will align the building of the PCF controls across all the platforms. So I'm definitely keeping my eyes on that. Next slide. So why would you want to build one of these things in the first place? Very important question to ask. Obviously, to extend the out-of-the-box behavior. But I do believe that PCF control should only be considered when you have reached the limits of what the out-of-the-box controls can do. It provides seamless user experience as the controls are configured in the place and sits next to the out-of-the-box controls. So it does not interrupt with the flow and the experience of the users actually using the system. I believe that it also boosts productivity for the actual developers because a lot of the boilerplating and scaffolding is done by the tool. And depending on how complex you actually want to take the control, you can leverage other modern frameworks and other libraries to do a lot of the heavy lifting for you. We already covered why reusability is such an awesome thing. So I'll talk about integrated component lifecycle. What do I mean by this? It's a really powerful thing that PCF can load in the same context as any other out-of-the-box control, and it's actually rendered as part of the host DOM structure. So these controls can actually participate in the host lifecycle. I'll demonstrate why this is so important later in the demo. And lastly, these controls are built and then they are built into solution components. So they're easily packaged up as one of the components in the solutions like any other customizations that you might do on Power Apps. So how do I go about building one of these things? So we have got the Power Apps CLI that Microsoft provided, which basically exposes the scaffolding and of the create and debugging and deploying of the PCF control. And also it comes with test harness for you to debug the control locally. And I guess as a developer building one of these things, you'll need to know TypeScript. And also depending on your need, you might use React, Fabric UI, and any other NPM packages that you can think of. My favorite tool at the moment, or actually will be for this particular one, would be Visual Studio Code, because it makes it so much easier when you're doing client-side coding, and plus it's an awesome extensions like PCS Builder that Danash has built that you could utilize for your development of the PCF control. Fiddler I use quite often actually to debug the control against the actual system. And lastly, the PCF controls can be easily CI/CD'd using Azure DevOps or GitHub Actions and other downstream. You can deploy to other downstream environments.
Tae,
Yep.
sorry. Do you use XRM Toolbox plugin for PCF, or you don't use any?
That one
I
do have it, but I don't actually use it as much because I can pretty much do everything within Visual Studio Code. So that PCF builder that Danish has actually built for the toolkit as well, toolbox as well, is actually also you can use something similar in the Visual Studio Code. So I use that, and I actually use Yeoman Generator, that actually is another scaffolding tool that Ivan has actually created. I use that as well. So yeah, there's a variety of options available for you to develop the PCF control. So yeah. Okay. Any other questions? And if I'm going too fast, please let me know. But I'm just conscious that I might be yakking on and not giving Lachlan enough time to talk about awesome embedded canvasser. So
it's okay. It's okay. Keep talking. Keep talking.
Keep talking. Okay, cool. All right. Such a gentleman. So carrying on. So so what useful controls can you build with using PCF? So from my personal experience, I have built more than a dozen production ready controls, and they tend to fall into three categories. And one is controls that enhance the out-of-the-box behavior or display. Number two is controls that aid and the data entry and boost the productivity of the user. And then three is more complex and what I would say a feature control that integrates with the external services. So, okay, let's see some demos, eh? Okay, so PCS demo. So I'm going to demo the category 1 and 2 first. And I'm actually taking the liberty of using controls from PCF Gallery to showcase the awesomeness of the community. And so here is the names and the contributors for the respective controls that I'll be showcasing. So let me go and share my demo screen. Okay. All right, can everybody see this? Okay, awesome. All right, sorry, yep. Okay, so to set the scene here, here's a vanilla install of Power Apps instance. I'm giving a fictitious like outdoor equipment manufacturing company for AdventureWorks. We all know that, right? And so, okay, here, so if I've got 2 accounts actually set up. And then if I drill down into one of these things, oh, sorry, I should be in the other form. You see the standard out-of-the-box form with few added customizations and some fields that I have added. So I'm just going to point out a few of these things. So I have added the ABN, I have added the rating, and also it has a end-to-end like association with the account type, so you can multiple of them for this account. And I have got a primary contact shown west with a quick view to visualize some of the information about that person on the form. I have configured a stores record, which essentially is stores for the Oz Adventures with the latitude and longitude for these stores. Cool, right? Okay, so I'm gonna just switch to this form, which I should have not started with. But anyways, as you can see, there was a very subtle change in the UI. If you're not wowed by this, that's exactly the effect I was going for. I think the most effective PCF controls are the ones that you don't realize that it is there. It gives the user a very native and seamless experience in their day-to-day activities, but with extra spice, as an extra functionalities on top. So to demonstrate the first category, enhance the out-of-the-box behavior or display, let's say I'm a salesperson, I'm going in and out of this account, right? I need particular value quite constantly, which is the account number, and I need to grab that information quite quickly. So I have configured against this particular field a clipboard function. So you can go in and click on a button, and then you should be able to just copy the value. So you could easily see that that would be quite a time saver for a person who's running around and trying to do things. And for ABN, you know that ABN should be like 11 digits and it should be nothing other than that. So for this particular field, I have configured a PCF control, which will do a pattern regex validation against the value, and it will indicate that you need 11 digits. And so, yeah, so it's a very good way to visually indicate to the user that this is what needs to be done, and all of those is not out of the box. Rating control, previously it had number 3 in it. Sure, that's fine. But then, I mean, if you can actually visualize that kind of data, it might be much easier for the user to quickly come in and see, and then, oh yeah, there it is, you know. And also in the details, we have options. Usually when you actually configure option sets in Power App, you can actually associate each option with a color. But for some reason, this doesn't actually get exposed out of the box, which is kind of weird because it's there. So this PCF control essentially goes and grabs those colors that you associated with the options and then displays them. And it's a really handy one to have because if you got some status, like so you want to alert the users that, oh, this has gone over the due date, then you can obviously indicate with a red color saying that it's gone over, right? And so things like that, like really small, like, you know, details that you can actually give to a form that will actually enhance the experience. And I don't have to go into the rich text editor. This is also a PCF control that Microsoft has built. You can see how that might be quite useful to have if you're producing more of those kind of content. Previously, I had the stores configured. As you can see, this is a much better way to visualize that particular data because you obviously want to know where those stores are. So this PCF control which is what you call a data set PCF control. You have configured it so that you have all these markers that gets displayed on top of the Google map. And then obviously Jason, who has built this control, has made a link to go to those records. So it's really easy for the user to come here and start using it this way. So let me demonstrate the second category. Nobody has questions, right? Okay, moving on. Okay, to demonstrate the second category is the controls that aid data entry and productivity of the user. So let me just go back. I'm just going to concentrate on this account types section here. If I go back to the account, I have this account type. So I can, let's say, using out of the box features, I can go to add and then go to tourism and add that and that. And that's already like quite a big, you know, number of steps for you to go and do all of that. And if I go back to like the scenario where I'm just going in and out of this, you know, thing, I'm on the call, I just want to just enter some data, then obviously that's not the most, you know, maybe you can get really quick at doing it. But if you have got something like a PCF control like this, which is an end-to-end selector, you can easily just go in and start selecting them. And then all of this, what it does behind the scene is the PCF control is using Web API to save that kind of relationship back into it. So you do see that this is actually getting saved on the fly. So which is really great. So this particular control I like a lot because also coming from that enhancing the productivity of the user, you're not navigating away from this page. For a particular lookup that I have, instead of just having that read-only view of that particular record showing up on the form, this control essentially goes and exposes those fields and making it editable, which is really good because then you can start entering stuff and you're on the call center, like, yeah, it was not west, it was east. And then you go and save, and this will actually go and save quite successfully and on the fly, and you can refresh it and you can see this. Obviously the one sitting on the form, it didn't get refreshed, but you can actually make that refresh as well. So that's the second category. So let me just go back to the slide. Any questions? Anyone? All good? All right, cool. All right, we have now covered the first two categories. And so I've got the third category, which are controls, which I consider them as feature controls that integrates with external services. you probably also encountered this, but we often encounter scenarios where you need to be able to view and update the external systems data from within your own application. We had a requirement like this, and we wanted to solve this without any disruption to the user's experience and flow. And we didn't want to delegate it to another app. And also, we didn't want to go down the path of data synchronization, which can get really messy, right? So to demo this, I had built a sales order PCF control. It's actually a much leaner version of the control that I had built for work. Michelle will recognize this, and Abby, where I replaced the backend infrastructure for demoing purposes. So just to see what is actually happening behind the scene, I did a little diagram. So you have this sales order PCF control. You have the Power Apps model driven, have configured the sales control, sales order control on the form. And then it essentially exposes sales order data that is maintained in a separate system where the data is stored and captured in the SQL database in Azure. Adventure works. And then the data is exposed by a web API hosted in Azure App Service. And this has been secured using Azure AD. The user must be authenticated in order to consume the web API, hence acquiring the token and using the access token to call the web API. So let me go back to my demo. So if I come to sales order, and this sales order PCF control is built using React. Obviously, I should have warmed up the service. Anyways, as you can see from the UI aspect of this control, it is very familiar. This is because I'm utilizing Fabric UI framework, the same UI framework that Microsoft uses to build their applications like the model-driven Power Apps that we are using right now and other Office apps. And so all this information is getting pulled from the SQL database using the web API.
Tae, can we ask a question?
Yeah, go ahead.
And did you want to ask?
Yeah, sorry. What is that framework before we forgot? What is the name of UI framework?
Oh, so I'm using React and I'm using Fabric UI framework.
Oh, Fabric UI. Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, awesome. All right. So okay. So all of this looks very native and seamless, right? And I'm just all of this, and you can sort and everything, and it's actually responsive as well. So I have actually configured the control to drop off some of the columns if in the case where you're in a much lesser size screen or something like that. And it also has a filter. And this, I wanted to come back and circle back to what I was saying about the integrated lifecycle. The fact that this dialog is displayed beyond the boundaries of the control, where the boundary is literally starts here, right? It's because this gets rendered as part of the host DOM. Pretty neat, right? So you can, and then let me go back. You can go to summary, and here I'm just going to use the copy function, and then I'm going to put in a different value. And then if I go to sales order, you can see that the data actually reflects almost instantly. So this is a real benefit because whatever the control is like listening out for in terms of notification, like it actually gets notified of that change. And then also whatever change that you make in the PCF control, you can actually make it notify the other way. So it's really, really awesome stuff. And so if I was to comment, and this is literally going back to the system, and then I'm just updating it, and late always gives you a red bar. And seriously, you can do anything with this. And so I've also got the authentication part in place as well. So if I've got like something I want to use a graph API or something like that, then you can also put an authentication layer on top, and then it will sign you out, and then it will go back to the screen itself. And then if I was to go back to the sales order, it will now say, please sign in to see the sales order, right? So, I mean, and once you actually have signed in, it actually remembers it. It stores the actual logged in detail, like session, and the local storage of the browser. So it's not like you have to authenticate all the time. But this is sort of like the security mechanism that you might want to put on top of the PCF control in the case if you do want to access something secure. Okay, so yeah, so as I was saying, sky is the limit here. It really depends on how complex you want to make it. So yeah, that's enough about PCF. I'm gonna hand this over to Lachlan. All right. Oh, sorry.
Thanks, Tae.
I'm just gonna share the screen again.
It's a tough act to follow, I feel.
No, it's gonna be awesome. Okay, cool. Let's go.
Yeah, okay. Let's have a chat about Canvas apps, and then I suppose embedded Canvas apps at the same time. So I think Canvas apps have been around for 4 and a bit years, I think now. I don't think they were actually called Canvas apps at the start. They were the Power Apps. The ability to embed the Canvas app is about 18 months old, so it's done the same life cycle as the PCS, where it's come out of gone into preview, then public preview, and then all that kind of stuff. And now it is in general release, which is great. And I think it's just worth pointing out, compared to PCF, what Microsoft sees the Canvas apps are, and that is this easy to create, display data from different sources right next to common data service data, or display common data service data. So it allows you to do it easily, and lots of connectors that allow you to do that. So there's 2 main ways to embed the Canvas app. You can use a custom control, which is very similar to how the PCF gets onto the form. It's just a drop down at the back of the control where you select what kind of control you want to render on the field. The problem there is you're limited to 1 of these per form, but that's the native supported way of doing this. You can also embed a Canvas app using an iframe. I have done that a couple of times in the past, but I probably would recommend way number 1 unless you absolutely have to have multiple Canvas apps on the form. It just gets very difficult to pass the context of the record you're operating in to the Canvas app. But that's basically like a little history at Canvas apps. Tae, if we could go to the next slide. Thanks. So I suppose after seeing all that cool stuff about PCFs, why should we care about Canvas apps, really? And it's about that ease to build them. So I a little intimidated about all the stuff that Tae's talking about. I wouldn't feel confident if I had a week that I would be able to work it out. While the demo that I'll show later took me about 25-30 minutes on a Sunday night. It's really, really easy stuff to build once you know what you're doing. And there's a lot of out-of-the-box connectors. So it doesn't just have to work with Dynamics or CDS. We can be connecting to everything else in the Microsoft stack, and then a bunch of other connectors. Why would you want to do that while in an embedded record? Well, you might have some situations, and I'll come to them in a second. But basically, you get a lot of pre-built tools that you can very easily and quickly use, which for me makes it a great prototyping tool. So quite often on the projects that I work on, when we're working with a customer, they'll come up and they'll say, look, we really need to be able to, just do this really specific thing. And I'm able to do that in a Canvas app. So I'll build it in a Canvas app first, and that'll get us most of the way, if not all the way, and then it becomes like a time, money, effort conversation as do we convert this to a PCF. I should say, back to the Elena wants to fight, because that's an entertaining talk. I remember early days of this, going through that PCF gallery, and I was very, very proud of myself, or probably that's not the right word, but I was going through it going, really, someone made a PCF of that? I can make a Canvas app of that, easy, no problems. Again, it's like someone made a calculator. I can make a calculator in a Canvas app. That's not hard, right? It's the difference is really the speed at which you can do it, and that's probably the big reason that you'd look at Canvas apps in the first instance. Could I have the next slide, please, Tae?
Lachlan,
So,
sorry.
yes.
Can I just? I think it's really important if we talk about like Power Apps in general, like user powered, things.
Yeah,
And
that's a great point.
if I'm a user, like I'm non-for-profit somewhere, I don't have developers, or I don't want to pay for developers, so I just like building stuff myself.
Yeah.
It's just a quick way for me to do something without having an extra dev skills and stuff. So
Yeah, absolutely. So like I have a music degree. That is my qualification in the world. I do not have an IT degree. I've done like intro to JavaScript, and that's where my technical qualifications stop. Beyond after that, it's just experience and using these tools that I've developed the confidence and the experience to work with in particular Canvas apps. So I could potentially be described as a glorified super user in that way. So I fit that bill of, potentially one day I could be the kind of person who's at an organization who, doesn't have a lot of money, and it's up to me to solve everything, and the Canvas app would be my tool. And I believe you'll be able to get 95, maybe even 98% of these things done with Canvas apps. It's just there'll be some considerations that come with it. So am I saying that Canvas apps are just quick and dirty fixes? Well, yes and no, they can be. So you certainly can use a Canvas app to plug a hole. And because of this one Canvas app embedded properly per form, it becomes easy to do that, but then hard to scale that. So the other option, and I have implemented this a couple of times and it's quite successful, is you can actually completely remove the form and then replace it with a Canvas app that has its own series of forms. So I have an example of this. Let me just request control. No, I don't want to request control. I want to present my desktop.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, let me know when you can see.
not yet. Oh, we can see it.
Cool.
Yeah, can see it.
So this is my very, very vanilla CRM trial instance. I've turned on sample data, and that's great. And this is the out-of-the-box form, right? So I got the account form, and it's got all this information on it. That's great. But what if I had a different scenario? Well, I can switch across to my account V2 form, which will probably take a while to load, because it's not like PCFs. It doesn't get to load as part of the DOM. Might just bring up the one I prepared earlier. And it looks like this. So really quickly, I've been able to create a Canvas app that's landscape. It scales to the width of the form. It scales to all the size or the real estate that we give it. And on the left-hand side, I've got a basic form, and I can edit. I can do everything I need to do. I can display the information, and I can put lots of fancy controls on this. Be red if this condition's met, or display this pop-up if this happens. All of that can happen in a Canvas app. But then I can also have on the right-hand side a gallery, which is a list filtered by show me contacts where they're related to this account, and then I can click through to these, and then this is going to load the contact. And hang on, I'm still on the account record. So the header of this is still the account, but now suddenly I'm looking at the contact details. And this currently is about as useful as a quick view form, but there's no reason why I couldn't put all those fun conditions on this, pop-ups if certain criteria are met or something like that, and have all of that information displayed here. But I can also go down another level. I can go as many levels as I want. I can display a case. So now I've got case information. So I've gone 3 levels deep. So I'm looking at a case related to a contact that's related to the account that I'm browsing dynamics in context of. So I'm 3 levels deep, and I haven't reloaded the form. And obviously, like, I can go back from here. I can create a new case. I can do all kinds of things. And this is a convoluted way of saying imagine I had a business scenario like an application or a some kind of assessment or really complicated business process flow in Dynamics where currently, or in a desired state, we're going to work through a series of records. We're going to start at one kind of like parent record, say an application record. That's a good example, an application record, and then that application record is associated with like a contact that's been freshly created. It's associated with some supporting documentation records, and then all kinds of things together. And the person who's processing this application has to go through and manually check or perform some kind of operation on every single record. In a Canvas app, I can very quickly display all of those records together and then program into these buttons to, once all of these records have been turned from red to green, then jump to the next set of records and turn them from red to green. And at the same time, I've got all these other connectors that allow me to go out to another system and say, potentially, like a good example is SharePoint, give me the actual SharePoint document and display that in the Canvas app. So suddenly now I'm not like downloading the reference data or downloading the reference document, actually verifying that what's in the record is in the document, and having multiple screens to do that. I can do that in one screen and have it all on one page. And again, what I've built here is about half an hour, 40 minutes of effort on a Sunday night. It's very quick and very simple to do. So I see this as probably one of the big benefits of Canvas apps, that I've very quickly created a lot of functionality. And it's that application or that assessment. So imagine like a bank wanting to assess loans or something like that, where lots of information and we need a guided experience through it. So it becomes very...
Lachlan, it's typical call center scenario. Then a person on the phone has to go through multiple screens and checks, and he has to be able to do all the things. And then it's not available out of the box.
Yeah. So that 3-point ID check or something like that, where you have to create a record that logs that you've asked for all of this information, somewhere to type into it, and then it has some logic to go yes, no. So it's probably not the fastest solution. It might not scale as well as the PCF will scale, but half an hour of effort, very quick to do, and it doesn't look that bad. Do you want to bring up the slides again, Tae, if you wouldn't mind?
Yep. Hold on.
Was there any questions on that before we move on?
Nothing in the chat. Guys, do you want to ask some questions?
No, it looks good. And sorry, just quick comment. Yeah, I agree, because I created both 1 or 2 PCF controls, and I also created a couple of power apps, and they're just different things. You cannot even put them on the same, compare it. It's really kind of different things, different use cases, different capabilities.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Yes, Elena. No, you go.
No, just for me, Canvas, how we call it, or Power Apps, is always about this. The power was around the multiple data sources, the ability to easily connect with the connectors to multiple data sources and display it on in one screen without any bloody integration or anything syncing data here and there. This it's amazing. I think it's really
and like I certainly think when you start talking data sources, you're talking different systems, right? So it's like I want my SAP system here. I want to be able to see that, and then I want to be able to see CRM next to it. Well, yeah, sure. But what I find is really cool is multiple records from different tables in CRM on one screen. Like that alone, and the ability to be able to press save on all of them and it write to all of those records in one go. But yeah, like there are some limitations. So with the Canvas app in particular, obviously there's one per form, and then yes, this incoherent UI with the host. So I'm not sharing my screen anymore, but I had that Power App preloaded because this was a demo and I didn't want to be caught with my pants down. It can take a while to load. particularly when it's a complicated big app. If on start of that app it has to do a lot of things, you can watch in the network on your browser as it loads the page, and then it loads the app, and then it goes off and gets all the data, and that can be really slow. Microsoft themselves say, like, when you actually want to start embedding stuff on the form and you have a lot of these in your organization, to definitely use PCFs, to not use Canvas apps. That's their advice, and that was quite new information to me. We working on engagement where almost every form has some kind of UI customization, and they follow the same path that I'm suggesting here, where they started with Canvas apps, get an idea, figure out what you want it to do, make a prototype, don't waste the time, and then you can give that Canvas app to a pro developer who can then turn that into a very functional, operational, scalable PCF. The other issue that I found a lot with the Canvas apps, particularly when you're doing these big application assessment kind of Canvas apps, is this complexity creep, because this app itself becomes like this standalone piece of functionality that like lives, breathes, and has its own life, where, you know, PCF is this little thing on the form, while this Canvas app, potentially, if you're writing to multiple data sources and writing to multiple records, it goes beyond just being an embedded control as to being an embedded application on the form. And that just has issues with, sorry, Elena?
So if you do it with PCF, isn't it going to be the same? Like, I mean, basically, Tae, can you tell me, the PCF controls, they talk to each other? Like, let's say something, you have to do this bank assessment app with PCF, you have to battle the same thing, basically. If you go with multiple data sources, it's still going to be complex, and it's going to be like a standalone pretty much.
It'll be a bit more of a integration exercise where you actually would put in all of those logic into some sort of web API to manage that kind of business logic and process. I guess PCF control, I mean, unless if it's something that I've demonstrated, like the sales order one, most controls are actually for what I have demonstrated in the to enhance some of these behaviors and help users to actually use the system better. Are the scenarios that we will be using PCF control. So if we now start talking, like, we got, I don't know, 3, 4, 5 data sources, it becomes simply another SPA, like single page application. Same thing as Canvas app, that you'll be reaching that same sort of complexity as well. But I'll probably talk about this on my limitation on PCF, is that what I found also with Canvas app is that it is very easy to get quite complex, and also that it's really hard to see where things are actually happening. But with the PCF control, because everything is in the code, so if you're a developer who's just reading the code and saying, you know, where all those pieces sit in terms of infrastructure style of things, then you know exactly what's happening by just glancing at it, right? So it's one of those things, right? Yeah.
I suppose the complexity creep then, it's not necessarily a limitation of the tool. It's just in my experience, it happens very quickly. Because you can do so much so quickly, it can very quickly get complicated. And from that complication, you have this complexity and just having to deal with it. So I suppose the limitations, what I've listed here as the limitations, they're not necessarily the limitations. They're things that you need to be aware of when you go in, so that you go in eyes open. Like I think things like scaling Canvas apps and making sure that they're as performant as possible. Like there are things you can do. Like we've spoken about this a couple of times before, Tae, about there's a call, a simultaneous call. So quite often at the start of your Power App, you want to go to this data source, give me some information, then go to this data source and give me some information. And prior to this little function, this simultaneous function, you had to do them sequentially. And with the addition of this function, you can now do them all simultaneously. And that can make your Canvas app go from like a 30-second, 20-second load time down to like a 2-second load time. So like there's little things you can do, and the more you get into it, there's more ways that you can find out what's happening underneath the hood, but it's not just there for you to use like I imagine the PCF is. Like it's a bit of a black box. It's not a total black box.
Cool. Do you want to cover the last two?
Daryl raised his hand.
Oh,
Yeah, sorry for being
Yeah.
garbage moderator.
That's fine. How do you do source control with Canvas apps?
Yeah, good question. Probably skipped over that. So it's a solutionable component. You can put in a solution. You can do all that kind of stuff. And this is not specific to embedded Canvas apps or non-embedded Canvas apps. They have their own version control as well, kind of native to the application that you build Canvas apps in. It's not as good as the other, or your traditional version control with solutions and moving that all out, that kind of stuff, but it exists and it's there. I've experimented with trying to put version numbers inside Canvas apps, and you can do it and it's fine. It just getting the version number that Microsoft or the Power Apps maker says the Canvas app version is running inside the actual Canvas app can just be a little tricky, and often you end up like on the start of your app you want a nice little version 1.1 and then do some changes and then come along and update it to version 1.2. That version numbering doesn't necessarily match what's actually in the Canvas app studio. But yeah, like it's certainly possible. You can certainly, after every change, rip it out and put it somewhere, and then have that as your own version control, or you can use the inbuilt one. So there's options. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, thanks.
Cool.
I've got a similar question to Tae, if it's okay.
Yeah, go ahead.
It's a governance. Like, I mean, I understand and I build my own PCF control and I know what's in there and I put in the source control. But what if I just I'm a lazy, I don't know what it is. You know what it is, lazy something. And I go to the PCF gallery and I took someone's control. So what's happening next? Do I just fork the branch? Like, do I do my own, pretty much like take this code and do my own things? What about support, or what about like if there are bugs or anything, and if it versions and everything? How does that work if it's not mine, if someone else's?
This is actually more about your best practice in terms of how you actually manage your code in-house. So this would come for anything really, actually. So if I was to actually take a PCF gallery control, and those are produced by contributors who love PCF and then just want to give something back to the community, right? But obviously there will be maybe some things that might not be up to scratch and that there might be buggy and stuff. So, I mean, I do look at the code of the control before I think that is something that we want to use. And sometimes I do also, I mean, obviously you can fork it because everything is in GitHub or somewhere they actually share the code and everything. The way that you actually build a PCF control, you can't always trust the building of the solution itself by the person providing it, just so that I'm not saying that I don't trust them, but it's just that sometimes you might actually make it a little bit more optimized, the code. And also the fact that they might actually have a full reference to an import for a certain library or something like that. And then when it actually does build and when it does the bundling of the actual code, it's actually quite bloated. So you kind of want to only reference those things and then make sure that it is properly packaged, that it has already tree shaken everything, that it doesn't require, because PCF controls, you can actually use multiple of them in your form or wherever. And so you do want to make it really lean. And so the amount of loading time on those PCF controls shouldn't be that much. So actually, that was another thing that I wanted to mention as part of one of the limitations of PCF, and I think Microsoft will be working on this at some point, but I'm not sure. Is that because those controls, say if I've got 2 or 3 or 4 controls that's actually using React, and I'm also using Fabric UI or some other thing. So if I've got 2 or 3 all using the same packages, right? They actually bundle them, all of them, like whatever. So it's not like those controls are sharing those libraries. So they're individually packaged. So you can already kind of see where it might be performance-wise not that optimal if you got too many of them. So I guess unless if you really want that like nice UI and everything like that, or I mean, if you're a pretty good front-end developer, you should be able to come up with, the skinning of the controls that actually matches where you're going to host it as well. So if you actually, don't want to use some of these third-party packages or things like that and just keep it vanilla, then that's pretty lean, right? So you do have to think about these.
So did
sorry,
you start
kind of
in your company? Do
Yeah.
you use just in-house build controls, or sometimes you just
I think the first control we used is actually a color picker from the PCF gallery, only because we needed something to actually, make it more interesting and make it visualized and stuff like that. So something like that. That's probably one of the first ones that we used. But for all the other controls, pretty much I've been building them, except for maybe 2 or 3 other ones. But I mean, when we do use it, we do carefully analyze that, is it actually going to be good that we use these? Yeah, so does that answer your question?
Yeah, thank you very much.
Okay. So I guess, all right, just gonna cover, say, since I'm talking, so yeah, you do need a developer for this PCF control, and yeah, there is a skill set and learning curve to them as well. Most of the times, like with the XRM, like development and everything, the way that Dynamics has grown, most of the developers that I usually talk to from that background are C# developers. And they usually tend to not have the front-end dev skills for some of these things that is requiring us to do. And they tend to shy away from it as well. But so there is that learning curve, definitely. And if you happen to be using external vendors, and goes against back to your question, that they produce something, you don't have a skill in-house to support this control, then obviously that's going to be a problem, right? So yeah, so that's something to always be mindful of, and yeah. And
That's
the
a
other
very
one,
interesting. This is a very interesting point. Interesting.
Yeah. It's good. Good that you're finding it interesting. Good. But yeah, what else is there? So at the moment, the model-driven app obviously can be bound to only actual control, so a field or data set. It can't be a standalone thing that you can embed onto the form. Maybe it might change in the future. I'm not sure. Maintainability again goes back to, like, do you have the skill sets and how to actually support this? And I think maintainability is not so much limitation as such. And if you look at it from, like, keeping the actual source and source control and everything like that, that's really maintainable, right? And keeping the versions that way. And yeah, so limitations. Do you have anything else to add, Lachlan?
No, I suppose with Canvas apps, the maintainability is similar. So embedded Canvas apps, well, they're pretty easy to manage because they've got to go on a solution. They have to go on a form, and chances are administrators doing that. There is a whole other school of thought and way of looking at Canvas apps just as a whole and how you maintain them and manage them in your organization. And that's like a whole other thing where potentially you make Canvas apps to manage your Canvas apps and flows and all this kind of stuff to manage that. And that's under the Power Apps Center for Excellence, if anyone is interested. But happy to move on to the next slide.
Okay, let's go to the next slide.
Yeah. I think we're pretty much.
We're getting there, and this slide you wanted in here, so
yeah, it's not going to be a boring consultant, right? I suppose I've alluded to a lot of this stuff already, but yeah, it's about asking the right questions when you go to tweak the UI. So can it be done out of the box? Is what you can do out of the box enough? And I like asking those hard questions. But I come very quickly to the value, benefit, time. You know, how much time do I have to spend? How much benefit? How much value is that going to be? And then also like that user adoption piece. That's very important because it could be you've spent $10 million on implementing your CRM and no one's using it because they can't do this one little thing. You spend a week, build a PCF or an embedded Canvas app, and suddenly your user adoption problem goes away. And obviously thinking about how you're going to manage these things and how you're going to scale them. So if you have a PCF on every single form, as I've seen with this project that I'm working on currently, that presents its own problems in, well, I want to change the one over there, but the one over there is very similar with the one over there. So do we now have to change both of them? And just managing all of that. And it just becomes another layer that requires administration in the build or the project. So just things to think about. Anything to add, Tae?
Cool. Yeah.
No.
So
Yeah.
yeah. Are we done? Yeah. I mean, it's the same thing, right? I mean, it's the whole time, money, and effort, like putting on the consultancy hat here. And so yeah. Obviously, for PCF control, there's an upfront investment. Again, we covered that. But then once it's developed, I think there's a huge benefit of actually using them, depending on, I guess, what it is that you have developed. But for the particular control that I showcased you before, that has been really well received by the business and is getting used by the users, and they keep on asking for more features on top of it, right? So it is very powerful stuff, and that covers the user adoption side of things. Scalable and deployable. So what I love about Parps and also the ecosystem is that it is deployable to other systems using solutions, right? So I've got a PCF control that's actually also being CI/CD'd into an environment as well. So the whole, everything's integrated, automated. I love that automation of these things. So it's very manageable. And performance, again, comes back to like how well have you coded it, and how many are there, and things like that. And yeah. So I think that's pretty much it from my side. Does anybody have any questions on this one?
I don't think we have anything more, do we? It's just open for a discussion.
If anybody wants to ask anything, this is the time, or otherwise we're just going to go to the next slide and that's it.
Yeah, guys,
Okay.
I would suggest, guys on the call, I would suggest to use this opportunity to actually ask questions if you have some, and use it as a discussion space. It's not just like watching, listening thing. It's please ask your questions if you have some.
Cool.
Can I ask quickly if this with the problem with the marketplace, how it's called for the power? There is PCF Gallery is not official marketplace for the
App source,
right? Yeah, the app source is not very usable, is it? Right. So that it seems to be like
I haven't really looked in there in ages. Yeah.
Daryl got a question too. Andrew, I'm sorry. Did I answer your question?
Sorry, I don't think I actually answered that.
So Andrew, my experience of AppSource is, and in some ways the PCF Gallery and the British mob who have their Canvas app gallery as well, is you see something that's really interesting, you try and download it, you try and get it into your environment, it doesn't work, you give up. The next day, you send an email to the person who built it saying, would you send it to me? And they send it across as a nice, easy solution with instructions, and it works. So it's mainly an advertising tool to say, hey, this exists, not necessarily a distribution tool. There's also there's a Microsoft Canvas app kind of gallery somewhere. I submitted an app for it once, and I know there's other apps out there that they're really good places to find just examples of what other people do, just in Canvas apps in general, like, and ways of rendering stuff and presenting data that is very useful. And it has the feature that you can just go into the Canvas app and actually start running it without
it's more
logging in.
community driven, really.
Yeah, I think that one's all partner driven. It's presented as a sales tool for the partner, but yeah, it's out there for anybody to use it. Sorry, Daryl.
That's all right. Thanks. With PCF, you mentioned you can do it in React. Is there any other frameworks that you've tried it with, Tae?
So you can also use Angular. So there's actually a example of this that you could actually play with in the Microsoft documentation section. So so Microsoft's been quite good, and they actually got an open source repo for some of these controls they have built. And so you could go and have a look at the examples there if you want. And I think some people try to get it work with Vue, but I'm not sure how successful that was. Yeah.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Alrighty, more slides. We're gonna wrapping up.
Yeah, wrapping up. So, summary. Would you like to cover this, Lachlan?
Yeah. Yeah, the best fit for the situation, I suppose, is the end of our fight, Elena. There's no clear winner. It's just,
We're just
use
peace
the
loving.
right tool. Yeah.
I
Yeah.
really
Virtual
enjoyed
hug.
this, and it felt like fight. At the moment, Tay started talking, and you was just like, eh, and then you started talking, and Tay's like, So yeah, it was a little bit of tension, a little bit.
Okay. Thank you.
Sure. Thanks, Elena.
No,
for having
guys,
us.
this
Yeah.
fantastic. I think it for me specifically was very inspiring, and I feel like I need to try this and that, and I've got some ideas for for my client, and want to try multiple things, and thanks, guys. It's very useful and fantastic session.
And very good presentation. Very well.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot for your time.
That's great. Thank you so much.
The last opportunity to ask questions. No questions.
Thanks for coming, everybody.
Yeah,
appreciate
thank
it.
you.
Have a good
It's
night.
odd time,
Have
but
a good night.
yeah.
I'm stopping recording. Have a good
Thank
night.
you.
See you
Yeah.
next
Good
time.
night.
Thanks,
Bye.
guys.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
You.
Bye.